Hey, Wes Barefoot again with Path to Freedom, and thanks for tuning in to the 5th video in my franchising FAQ series. My last video, I gave some examples of different categories of franchise businesses and a rough idea of what the typical investment range might look like for franchises within those categories. So in this video, I want to go into a little more detail around what a franchisor means when they give you an initial investment range, and then also talk about some common ways in which people fund franchise investments. So any franchise company is legally required to provide an interested candidate with a legal document called a franchise disclosure document, or an FDD for short. There's a lot of great information in an FDD, but one of the key pieces of information is what's usually referred to as an initial investment range. And that range is based on historically what it has cost other franchisees in that business to get their business up and running. So one common misconception I run into is, what is actually being referred to in that initial investment range. So a simple way to think about it is that initial investment range typically covers the initial franchise fees. So that's what it costs to actually become a franchisee. It would also include any expenses that you would likely incur to get your franchise business open. And usually the franchisor also includes at least several months worth of operating capital for the business. So a lot of people see these initial investment ranges. Let's just say, for example, that a franchisor tells you their initial investment range is $100,000 to $150,000. So a lot of people hear that and they think, wow, I've got to write a check for somewhere in between $100,000 and $150,000 just to become a franchisee. Not the case. That range is not only including the expenses that you would incur to get open for business, but also expenses to operate the business for a certain period of time. In the FDD, any franchisor is going to give you a detailed breakdown of all of the different costs that they account for to get to whatever range they're giving you. So the point is, you're not going in blind. You have the opportunity to gather a lot of good information, historical data based on other franchisees. You'll also have the chance to talk to other franchisees to validate this and learn from their experience. So you are able to form a very realistic idea of just how much capital you might need to invest in a particular franchise business. So hopefully that helps. The next question, I'm sure, is, okay, well, how would I go about funding a franchise? I think of this very similar to when people are looking to buy a new house, right? Most people that are looking to buy a new house do not pay cash for it, right? Even if they have the cash, so they usually put a down payment down and then they leverage a mortgage to cover the remaining balance on the house. That's the same for most people when it comes to investing in a franchise. Very few people come completely out of pocket to fund a franchise investment, even if they can afford to. And there are some very common funding mechanisms that people use all the time for franchise investments. One of the most common is small business loans. The SBA does franchise loans all the time, and they like doing those types of loans because there's already a business model in place. There's a blueprint. There's a lot more data compared to someone that's looking to get an SBA loan to start, their own business from scratch, where there may not be any proof of concept and there's not nearly as much data to go off of. So SBA loans are very common, and usually you're looking at anywhere from a 10 to 20% down payment essentially on the amount of the loan. So that's a great way for a lot of people to fund a franchise. There's also some very interesting programs out there that will allow people to tap into retirement funds or investment accounts specifically to fund a franchise business. So for some people, they prefer that option versus taking on debt through a loan of some sorts. With the retirement funds, there's some really interesting options where you can essentially tap into retirement funds, reinvest that money in a franchise business. And because you're reinvesting the money, you're able to avoid some of the tax penalties that would typically be associated with tapping into retirement funds prematurely. So another common way is, HELOCs, home equity line of credits. And then I've worked with a lot of people over the years that, have known they wanted to get into business for themselves, maybe not had the capital or the assets to do it completely on their own. So they go out and find a business partner or they find an investor. There's a lot of different angles that one could look at going that route as well. So the point is, there's a lot of different options for someone that's really serious about getting into business for themselves and wants to invest in a franchise. And that's a big part of what I specialize in with the people that I work with, is not only helping them identify and investigate franchise businesses that are likely to be a good fit for them, but also making sure they have a good funding strategy so that when they find the right franchise for them, they have a plan in place to get the capital they need to do that. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this maybe cleared up any confusion or questions that you may have had when it comes to, how to actually go about funding a franchise business. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to catch my next video in this franchising FAQ series.